Welcome to the Rime Buddhist Center's Dharma Talk podcast, Achieving Peace Through Compassion. This podcast is a recording of the Dharma Talks given during our Sunday service. This talk was given by Lama Matthew Palden Gocha.
So, for today's Dharma Talk, I thought I would start with a story. Bedtime stories with Lama Matt. I'm workshopping a segment title. But anyways, long ago, 6 old men lived in a village in India, and each was born blind. The villagers loved them and kept them safe. Since they could not see the world, they had to imagine its wonders. They listened carefully to travelers' stories, especially stories about elephants. They were told elephants could trample forests, carry heavy burdens, and frighten people with their trumpet calls. Yet they also knew the Raja's daughter rode an elephant safely through the kingdom. How could both be true? And so, like most old men do, they argued. An elephant must be a powerful giant. No, it must be gentle and graceful. It's as sharp as and deadly like a spear. It's nothing more than a large cow. It must be magical. It does not exist at all. Finally, the villagers arranged for them to visit the palace to discover the truth. And each blind man touched one part of the elephant. One felt the side and declared, "It's a wall." One felt the trunk and said, "It's a snake." One touched the tusk and said, "Oh, it's really a spear." One touched the leg and said, "No, it is a very large cow." One touched the ear and said, "It's a great fan." And one touched the tail and said, "A rope, dangerous indeed." And they argued again, causing quite the ruckus. Finally, they heard someone say, "Stop shouting," from a very angry voice. But it was the Raja, who had been awakened from his nap by the noisy argument. And the Raja asked, "How can each of you be so certain you're right?" And he said gently, "The elephant is very large. Each of you touched only one part, but put the parts together, and you will see the truth. Now let me finish my nap in peace." So after their friend returned with water, the 6 men rested, considering the Raja's advice. "He's right," said the first blind man. To learn the truth, we must put all parts together. Let's discuss this on our journey home. All right. How many times have we done the same thing? Misinterpreted the cause of our anger due to not having a full picture of our situation? We too often fall prey to our impure perceptions. Like the blind men, we each touch only a small piece of our experience. A harsh word, a setback, a moment of anxiety. And we declare, as the blind men did, "This is the truth. This is who they are. This is who I am." And then we argue. We suffer and argue and suffer and argue, and we cling to our piece of the elephant as if it were the whole story. The Raja gave the blind men excellent advice to put the parts together. And this is the wisdom of gathering more information, of seeing the bigger picture. And certainly in our daily lives, this can be helpful. When we step back and consider that someone who hurt us might be suffering themselves, or that a difficult situation has factors that we cannot see, we become less reactive. And this is really good advice. But the Dharma goes further. It invites us to look not just at the relationship between the parts, but at the very nature of the parts themselves. And it asks, what if the problem is simply that we lack the full picture? What if the deeper problem is that we believe any picture we have, any perception at all, is solid and real? So this past week at work, I've been noticing a frustration building while I've been working at my day job. For those of you that don't know, I work at an IT help desk. And calls were coming in this week. Tickets were starting to stack up, and the queue kept growing instead of shrinking. It seemed like every time, as soon as I got off a call, there was 2 more waiting. And at first, it felt like pressure. But then a story began to form. And I thought, man, I am just doing too much. Are these other team members that I have not even pulling their weight? Are they even answering the phones? And I really started to think, man, this really isn't fair that I'm having to do all of this. And obviously nobody else is helping. The frustration felt solid, justified, and real. But then when I paused and looked directly, there were only ringing phones, queued tickets, and really just the tightening in my chest and in my shoulders. And later, when I actually looked at the performance data, I saw something I hadn't noticed in the heart of the moment. Everyone's ticket volume was high. It wasn't just me. The sense of unfairness had come from the very partial view of my piece of the elephant. And when I looked directly at the frustration itself, I couldn't find a solid core to it. There were sensations, there were thoughts, energy moving, but no fixed enemy, no fixed self being burdened. The workload didn't disappear, but the struggle itself softened. And there was still effort, but far less resentment and suffering. And so this brings us to the heart of today's teaching. In our Bodhisattva challenge this week, we're continuing the transforming adversity onto the path. And the slogan this week says, meditating on the appearance of confusion as the four kayas is the unsurpassed protection of emptiness. Maybe you read that and you were like, I got it. But probably for most of us, this sounds very abstract, maybe even intimidating. What exactly are the appearances of confusion? What exactly are these four kayas? And what is emptiness? And how can it protect us? And from what? But it's profoundly practical. We suffer because we do not know the true nature of what we experience. It's like a dream. In a dream, we believe everything is real. If the dream is pleasant, we're happy. If it is frightening, we suffer. But the moment we recognize it as a dream, we're freed, even while the images still appear. And the same is true in waking life. The suffering lasts as long as we believe appearances as solid. We also see this method reflected in verse 24 of the 37 practices of a Bodhisattva. And he says, the practice of all bodhisattvas is to recognize delusion whenever one is confronted by adversity or misfortune. For these sufferings are just like the death of a child in a dream. And it's so exhausting to cling to delusory perceptions as real, end quote. Whenever we experience suffering caused by harm from other beings in the outer environment, these afflictions and sufferings are nothing more than delusory perceptions of our own mind. They thus lack even the slightest true existence. All phenomena ultimately lack true reality, and so it would be an error for us to mistake what is unreal for reality. And when we speak of emptiness, we mean that phenomena lack inherent independent existence. Emptiness does not mean nothing exists. It means nothing exists in the solid, separate way that we assume it does. Everything arises dependently on causes, conditions, perceptions, conceptual labeling. When we forget this, we suffer. So what about these four kayas? The kayas are various aspects of the states of Buddhahood. Khentrul Rinpoche points out that kaya does not refer to an actual physical body, but instead a body of qualities. I think Khentrul Lodhthai Rinpoche has given us one of the best descriptions I've ever read about these four kayas related in this slogan. To understand this third instruction, we need to become familiar with the Sanskrit term kaya. Kaya can be translated literally as dimension, form, or body. It is not referring to a physical form, but rather a body of qualities. It describes the ultimate nature, which everything is complete. In other words, the ultimate truth that encompasses all phenomena. Atisha Dipankara, in his advice to Namdak Suknor, says, in phenomena's primordial empty mode of being pulsates unbearable compassion that reaches out to beings. When compassion arises, it does so from the ultimate expanse. And when it ceases, it does so within the ultimate expanse, my son. So they describe these different aspects of awakened reality. Dharmakaya, the basic and all-pervasive nature of phenomena. Sambhogakaya, the unceasing nature of all phenomena as the basis for the arising of the Nirmanakaya, and the Nirmanakaya is the aspect of enlightenment that can be perceived by ordinary beings, and the Swabhikakaya is the natural union of the three kayas and the purity of the basic space of reality. There you go. You got it, right? Okay, well, these definitions are beautiful, but how do we actually work with them? How does Khentrul Rinpoche express these four kayas in relationship to everyday life? And he says, as practitioners, we can integrate the wisdom of emptiness, also called the four kayas, to transform adversity. Whatever we experience, be it physical pain or mental fear and anxiety, these perceptions arise from delusion. In a dream, we might be burned by a fire or carried off by a river, but these appearances manifest to our perception because we are confused. They do not exist in their own right. And we can apply this view to our waking life by recognizing that in any given moment, the appearances that arise have no inherent truth. They do not exist as we perceive them. By relaxing in this recognition of the empty nature of appearances, the mind is free of clinging to a perceiver and a perceived. It is free from any fixed reference point. In that moment, everything in its entirety is experienced as empty essence, or Dharmakaya, the absolute dimension. The mind that perceives the objects and experiences are both empty, but that does not mean perceptions cease to appear. The very nature of appearance is emptiness. While being empty by nature, these appearances continue to occur and are experienced. This is called Nirmanakaya, the dimension of manifestation. The appearance is empty. The emptiness is the appearance. Appearances and emptiness are timelessly one and the same. This primordial unity is referred to as Sambhogakaya, the dimension of enjoyment. And though we speak of these four kayas as if they are different things, they are in fact indivisible. And we call this the Swabhavikakaya, the dimension of oneness, end quote. So this probably sounds a little philosophical, just a teensy bit. So let's return to the blind man holding the elephant's tail. So the Raja's advice was to put the parts together. And this, again, is excellent advice on the relative level. But the teaching of the four kayas invites us to go further. It invites us to examine any single part and see its true nature. The sixth blind man grabbed the tail and declared, "This is a rope, dangerous indeed." Then he suffered, arguing with the others, convinced of his reality. Now imagine if the sixth blind man, instead of immediately conceptualizing rope and clinging to that concept, he had simply stayed with the raw experience, the texture, the coarseness, the sensation in his hand. Before the label, rope, before the story, dangerous, before the identity, I am the one who knows the truth, what was there? There was just experience, vivid, present, and ungraspable, open. And that openness before labeling it is Dharmakaya. When perception forms, when the experience appears as something, that is the Nirmanakaya. But is the appearance separate from the oneness? Is the rope made of anything other than the awareness which it appears? No. And that appearance and emptiness are inseparable. That is Sambhogakaya. And the indivisible unity of it all, the openness, the appearances as one reality, is that Swabhavikakaya. It is the direct seeing. The blind man would not find a solid rope. He would not find a solid self holding the rope. There would be nothing solid to defend, nothing solid to cling to. And in that finding of nothing, there is freedom. This is what Judy Leaf points to when she says, through careful attention and meditative practice, we begin to see how every perception begins with uncertainty and openness, Dharmakaya, then starts to come into focus, Nirmanakaya, then develops energy and beings to come together, Sambhogakaya, and finally clicks, synthesized as immediate present moment experience, Swabhavikakaya. It is though confusion is awakening in disguise, end quote. So the blind men suffered because they each grasped their piece of the elephant and then declared it absolute truth. We suffer for the same reason, but the Dharma offers a way out that does not require us to touch a whole elephant, thank goodness. But what happens if we pause? What is anger before our story? Is it solid? Does it have edges? Can we find where it begins and ends? If we look directly, when we find sensations, thoughts, energy, but no solid core, the anger may still appear, just as the dream still appears, but it loses power to trap us. And this is what Pema Chodron means when she says simply, there is nothing solid to react to. You have made much ado about nothing, end quote. So in this coming week, during your sitting meditation, just recall a moment in your day when there was a disturbing emotion that arose within your mind and caused mental affliction and suffering. Don't ruminate on what was right or wrong with the situation. Instead, just drop your justifications and your reactions. Look at your response and the unpleasant sensations you were feeling. Focus on that emotional state and look directly at its essence. And ask yourself, is this anger solid? Where does it begin and end? Is it made of anything other than sensations, thoughts, and stories? And when nothing tangible can be found, don't be alarmed. Don't try to fill the space. Simply allow your mind to rest in that unfindability. That resting is the protection of emptiness. That resting is the four kayas spontaneously present. So I want to close with just a few verses from Longchenpa's Chariot of Excellence. And he says, may all the dreamlike beings in samsara who strayed from their primordially pure nature gain freedom from the four great streams of sorrow. May they reach the state endowed with all the qualities of great bliss. May I be a guide for all without exception and lead them from samsara, this great empty dreamlike form, this mighty ocean difficult to cross, the mass of suffering's fire that reaches even to the summit of existence. I hope this talk has been beneficial to you. This week, may you have the courage to look directly at your mind. May you find not a solid enemy, but an open, wakeful, and compassionate space. And may you have compassion, wisdom, gratefulness, and joy. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Rime Buddhist Center's Dharma Talk podcast. Music was provided by Barefoot Bran Music. Please consider supporting the Rime Buddhist Center by making a donation at our website at www.rimecenter.org/donate.